What's up, guys, and welcome to finally the. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the SGN Podcast. And if you're familiar with my content, you know that I talk a lot about sports and gaming. Those are my two things. That's what SGN is: sports and gaming news. So, of course, if you've probably seen some of my videos, you probably have noticed that I'm not a big fan of video editing. I don't like to do a lot of special effects, and I'm just not really that interested in learning all the ins and outs of editing when it comes to videos. I'm a lot more interested in podcasting, and even in the way I consume media, it's generally through podcasting. That's just the kind of media that I prefer, whether it's Joe Rogan, whether it's Punch Drunk Sports, whether it's, Bill Burr, Joey Diaz, all these guys. I, for the most part, enjoy podcasting a lot more, or podcasts in general, a lot more than I do YouTube videos, for example. So I figured, let me just do a podcast because I enjoy it more. And I think that the fact that I enjoy it more will actually transmit over to the shows, and you'll probably be able to enjoy it a bit more as well. Now, I'm going to be talking each episode, of course, about a bunch of different stuff, but for the most part, it will be all sports and gaming. I have a few topics today that I really want to talk about. Of course, UFC 235 is this weekend, headlined by Jon Jones taking on Anthony Smith. Of course, I want to talk about the Premier League. I do want to talk about the upcoming Champions League matches that are coming in about what today's Friday when I'm recording, so in 3 or 4 days, excuse me. And I do want to talk about Crackdown 3 a little bit, and I will be talking all about that stuff. And I do want to plug real fast that I do have a Mortal Kombat podcast with my friend Thomas. If you're interested and if you like what you hear here, and if you never checked it out, then definitely go do that. It's literally all about Mortal Kombat. We've covered MK1, we've covered MK9, we've covered all the stuff that's coming out in the Combat Cast. We're really getting ready for MK11, so definitely go check that out if you are interested in Mortal Kombat. So let's go ahead and talk about all the sports-related stuff that I want to get, I really want to get off my chest. Not really off my chest, but I want to talk to you guys about. And, of course, UFC 235 is probably the biggest one because, of course, Jon Jones does make his return after destroying Alexander Gustafsson against Anthony Lionheart Smith. And, listen, I'm going to be realistic here. I don't know how much of a chance Anthony Smith has, but realistically, who actually has a chance against Jon Jones? Because literally nobody can touch this guy, and the few people that have touched him, like Gustafsson, or I guess DC kind of put him in at least some kind of difficulty, they got smoked in the rematches. It's like Jon Jones, once he gets the first look at you, he might struggle a little bit in certain scenarios, but as soon as he gets a second chance, he fucking destroys you. So Anthony Smith, I guess he has the puncher's chance. He is a good fighter. He's a dangerous fighter, and he has a lot of power. But that's not something that Jon Jones has never really seen before. And I think the biggest thing for people fighting Jon Jones is that half the time, by the time they get into the cage, they're pretty much just broken. It's a lot like the Anderson Silva effect. As soon as they realize that they're in front of arguably the greatest fighter to ever live, and definitely the greatest fighter, in my opinion, on the planet right now, as soon as they realize that they're in front of that person, they just I think they kind of question themselves, and they wonder what they can do that so many people haven't. Now, we saw Chris Weidman. You could say what you want. Like, Anderson Silva was clowning on him, and he did, of course, get kind of lucky, I guess you could say, in the second fight. But Chris Weidman, he was not broken. He did not back down. And it's going to take somebody like that to do that to Jon Jones to beat him, of course. But somebody already has. And that man was Daniel Cormier, who is arguably, the greatest heavyweight of all time. Because let's just be real, he knocked out, he beat Stipe, who had the most title defenses for heavyweight in UFC history. He came into the UFC after Strikeforce and being the Grand Prix champion. He beat the likes of Frank Mir, who, of course, at that time wasn't in his prime, but it was still a pretty solid win for a guy coming over from Strikeforce. And then, of course, he's beaten Alexander Gustafsson. He's beaten Anthony Rumble Johnson twice. Of course, those are light heavyweight. But if you look at what he's done in the sport, among the, from middleweight up, except for maybe Anderson Silva, he's arguably the greatest of all time to ever do it, except for Jon Jones. So if a guy like DC, who has been to the Olympics, he has won so much in his career, he has been consistently regarded as the number 2 best fighter in the world, at least in those weight classes, alongside Jon Jones, and yet he wasn't really able to come anywhere near beating Jon. So what is it really going to take to beat Jon Jones? I just honestly don't know. It's either going to take a lucky punch, Jon Jones maybe taking somebody extremely lightly like he did against Gustafsson in the first fight, Or, I don't know, something like Jon Jones just maybe doesn't have his heart in it anymore and doesn't really try. I guess those are the type of things that could stop Jon Jones. Or maybe he simply blows it by doing something stupid in his personal life, which wouldn't be surprising. But in terms of Anthony Smith, I don't really know what he could possibly do to beat Jon, because Jon's too smart to get caught by big punches. So at the very least, if he does get caught by a big punch, then he's smart enough to take you into a certain scenario to where you're not going to really be able to do anything with it. Like, I think Lyoto Machida landed a pretty good shot on him once, and really, that was arguably the biggest one he's ever been hit by. Maybe Gustafsson landed a few good shots, but none of those really, really put him in a lot of danger. And then we saw, of course, Vitor Belfort he hyperextended the shit out of his arm, and yet Jon Jones still proceeded to just beat the shit out of him. So, we know that when Jon Jones is in situations to where a regular human being is probably going to break, he will not break, and he can get out of them, and he's smart enough to get out of them and actually beat the shit out of you while he's technically, or at least theoretically, in a weakened state. So, what's Anthony Smith going to be able to do? I don't know, and I personally don't think he's really going to be able to do much in this fight. I do respect him. I actually like him quite a bit. I'm not going to say I'm a huge fan, but because I haven't really seen a whole lot of him in this regard, but I do think he's a pretty solid analyst as well. So, I mean, I don't dislike the guy. I actually kind of like him. I like the fact that he is an underdog, and he kind of always talks about how he's an underdog, but he's also been saying some kind of weird stuff, like Jon Jones is the better martial artist, but he's the better fighter. But I don't know. Like, honestly, that kind of stuff it's just kind of played out, and I don't think there's much in that. And I just think that Jon Jones kind of is going to go in there, and as we've seen him do against just about everybody, not named like DC in the first fight or not named Gustafsson in the first fight, he's going to smoke him. He's just going to absolutely mollywash him. I think he's going to continue his run of, staking his claim as the greatest of all time. And I really think that the only person that can maybe put him under difficulty is maybe a heavyweight DC. And I guess it's all pretty much heavyweights. Those are pretty much the only guys that can put him under pressure, because they will have the physical advantage over him, at least in terms of physical size. He's probably going to be taller than most guys and going to have a much longer reach than most guys, but he is still going to be, at least based on what we see of him right now, he's going to have the smaller frame in terms of just how big he's going to be. You know what I mean? Not necessarily in terms of height, but how big he's going to be. So I guess technically at heavyweight there are some more interesting matchups for him because he's never been there before, and there's a lot of people that he could fight. Like Stipe would be a great fight. I guess Kane, technically, if he was doing a bit better, would probably be a good fight. Ngannou would be an interesting fight. There's plenty of fights in there at heavyweight that would be very, very interesting. But right now at light heavyweight, there's really nobody that can do anything to him, in my opinion. And I think Anthony Smith is going to take a beating. That's just me being realistic. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump towards the bottom of the card here, because I didn't originally intend on moving from the prelims all the way up to the main event, but I just kind of flowed into talking about Jon Jones. But I'm going to talk about some of the fights that really interest me on the prelims. And this one isn't necessarily a fight that I'm crazy interested in, but it's one that I would generally watch, because Diego Sanchez, everybody loves Diego Sanchez. Let's just be real. Like, he's a legend. He's a pioneer of the sport. So whether we like it or not, because of course he does take a lot of beatings nowadays, he is still somebody who every time he goes out there he gives 100%. So either he gets knocked out or it's going to be a war. You know what I mean? It's going to be a war. So I am hoping that this is going to be a good fight for Mickey Gall to kind of experience that, to really experience what it's like to be in a war against a guy like Diego Sanchez, who gives 100%, and he is simply there to put down as much of a beating as he possibly can. The question is, at Diego Sanchez in the current state that he's in, how much of a chance does he really have against a young guy like Mickey Gall, who on the ground is very dangerous, and he's been training with Joe Schilling, so by all accounts, based on what Joe Schilling's been saying and what some people have been talking about, Mickey Gall's striking has improved leaps and bounds. So if that's the case, and seeing the fact that Mickey Gall is, I'm assuming, going to be a lot bigger than Diego Sanchez, physically there seems to be quite a bit difference. I haven't seen them face to face yet, but I do definitely think that Mickey Gall is going to be a much bigger guy. I think that this is going to be, especially because it's at welterweight. Diego Sanchez is moving up from lightweight to go up to welterweight once again, and I just think he's going to be a much smaller guy. And I think that Mickey Gall, if he can kind of use some improved boxing skills and keep Diego Sanchez at range, and I just think there's really nothing much for Diego Sanchez here. And it's kind of like, I'm not going to say that the UFC is trying to set him up to get beat down, but it's kind of like Diego Sanchez is a pretty big name for all fans throughout the actual history of the sport, and there's a chance for Mickey Gall to kind of get I don't know. I'm not gonna say get popular off of that because he's already pretty popular for beating CM Punk and stuff like that. But I definitely think that this is a chance for them, the UFC and Mickey Gall, to shine and kind of build up his name a little bit. So I definitely think that this is probably going to be one of those fights, and I just think that Mickey Gall is going to win. But I like Mickey Gall. I definitely like Mickey Gall. Like he seems like a nice guy and all that stuff. He's pretty funny. He's been on Punch Drunk Sports a lot, and which is a podcast whose website I used to write for and stuff like that. And he seems like a good guy. All right. So I am hoping that he will have a very good career. But part of me wants Diego Sanchez to win. But at the same time, part of me wants Diego Sanchez to realize it's over. Okay, like realistically, he is just putting himself into more damage. So I want him to win on one side, but I think that maybe another loss would kind of help him realize he needs to stop. Because if I'm not mistaken, his last win, he was doing like the title fight gesture. Come on, it's just. I mean, I could be wrong about that. I definitely could be wrong. But at the same time, man, just like Diego Sanchez, he's had such a great career. And I think it's just time for him to call it quits. But I think that Mickey Gall will get the W. The next fight I'm kind of interested in is Misha Cirkunov versus Johnny Walker. And this is just because in UFC 3, Misha Cirkunov is pretty much my biggest nightmare. Like, except for flyweights. If you've ever done a tournament in those where you've done like open weight tournaments, flyweights are the most dangerous fighters in the entire game. Because I think that the way the game works, and that's kind of how me, my friend Marco, and my brother Gianluca have kind of come to the conclusion that the way that game works when it comes to mixing in divisions is that they maintain their power, they maintain their speed, and they maintain their chin stats. So they have, I'm not going to say in terms of power and stuff like that, as high stats as heavyweights, but they keep their advantages. They don't really have any disadvantages. So, except for, I guess you could say range, but let's just be real, like, there is no using your range in UFC 3. So, realistically, like, those guys are absolute torture gods. The only other person in that game that I fear, other than, I guess, Vanderlei Silva, is Misha Cirkunov, because this guy puts a beating on me every single time. I remember, like, the first time I fought him in a tournament, the game had just come out. I beat the holy shit out of him for an entire round, came out in the second one, and he just absolutely tortured me. He just demolished me in any way possible. My legs were completely fucked. My liver was completely screwed. My head was basically, knocked off. And just overall, he put a beating on me. So I have kind of become, through that, a fan of Misha Cirkunov in some ways. Like, I'm not a huge fan, but I do want to kind of watch him fight. And of course, the fight after that is going to be a barn burner. It's Jeremy Stephens versus Zabit Magomedsharipov, which I don't understand why people have a hard time doing that, saying that name. People do have an issue with it. I don't know, maybe it's because I live in Europe, so we have, we're more used to this type of stuff, but at the same time, Zabit Magomedsharipov, it's not that difficult a name to say or kind of spell, which was kind of weird because on the Fight Companion recently, they weren't able to do either one. But regardless, this is going to be a very, very fun fight because we know Jeremy Stephens very well. All right, he's a guy who's been in the game for a long time. He's a veteran. He's got huge power for that weight class. He's very explosive. He's got decent wrestling, and just overall, he's just a very, very solid, well-rounded fighter. He's not going to be a title contender at 145, but he's always going to be one of those guys that if you can beat him, then you know that you are at the very least legit. Zabit Magomedsharipov has shown some great striking techniques. Okay, he's a very, very fun guy to watch. He's extremely entertaining, and he's a very, very promising prospect. What we have seen him, though, is that he gets tired, and I'm assuming that a lot of that has to do with him doing so many crazy techniques, doing a bunch of weird stuff half the time, and it kind of gets him into trouble because sometimes he does also get rocked. So it's going to be an interesting one because if he gasses out against a guy like Jeremy Stephens, then there's a chance of him getting his head knocked clean off. But at the same time, if he can beat Jeremy Stephens and possibly knock him out with doing some crazy stuff, this is a huge chance for him to really grow in popularity and become I'm not going to say a star, but kind of put himself on the map in terms of a guy that you have to really take seriously for the title picture. Because imagine a guy like him, who is kind of like a Yair Rodriguez type thing in terms of they're both very entertaining to watch. Their striking is very, very fun. But maybe, I don't know, maybe on the ground he's a bit better. So we'll see, at least in some ways. I don't know. He is Russian, so he has the kind of backing of that community, I'm assuming. So if, much like Khabib, only I think the difference is that Khabib Nurmagomedov is pretty boring in his style. Like, it's fun because you're watching a guy just absolutely pummel another human being for generally 25 minutes, talking shit to him the whole time. So it's fun to see. But a guy like Zabit Magomedsharipov, if he can get himself into the point where he is very close, at least, to a title shot, and he can get the Russian people behind him, and he has that entertaining style, which is going to really appeal to a global audience, there's a chance of him really becoming a huge star. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing this fight, and I think that this is probably going to be this could easily be your fight of the night, because realistically, if I look at the rest of the card, I at least know, or at least have a feeling that I know how they're all going to play out, and none of them really scream to me like barn burner except for this one. This one is definitely going to be, in my opinion, fight of the night, and it's going to be a hell of a fight to watch. Moving on to the main card. Now we have Cody Garbrandt versus Pedro Munoz. I don't have much to say about this. I'm not a Cody Garbrandt fan. I think he's kind of annoying, but he definitely has a lot of power, and Pedro Munoz is definitely a very good fighter. But I think that Cody Garbrandt in this situation, I think I have to favor him because he has that title fight experience. He's gone the distance with Dominic Cruz. He has had 2 fights in which he got knocked out both times by TJ Dillashaw in pretty much the same exact fashion, but those kind of losses may have humbled him and may have kind of given him the idea that some things need to change. And I think that against Pedro Munoz, we might see a new and improved Cody Garbrandt. And really, if he does, then you never know. He might get another title shot, because it kind of depends on what happens with TJ and Marlon Moraes and Henry Cejudo, but he's still one of those guys that in a bantamweight division that doesn't have a ton of depth. He's always 2 or 3 wins at the most away from getting himself a title shot. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe they'll do a rematch between him and Dominic Cruz if he does win, which would be very interesting. But regardless, it's going to be I think it's going to be a fun fight. Nothing like incredible. But yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Next, I'm not going to talk about this one really at all. Tisha Torres and Weili Zhang. I don't know. This isn't to be sexist or anything like that, but I'm not a huge fan of most female fights. I don't know. It's getting much better. I will say that it's getting much, much better. But at the same time, kind of watching it is kind of like watching the prelims. Like the highest level, not the highest level, but I would say that the tier below that, it's kind of like watching male prelim fights. And that's just the way it is, Male MMA has been going on for about 20 years now. 25 years, something like that. So it's been going on for a while now. 25 years at least, yeah. So you figure it has had 25 years of development. Whereas female MMA, at least when it comes to the UFC, has only been around for 5 years now. So it makes sense for their level to be lower. Now, whenever Joanna Jędrzejczyk fights, I generally watch it, even if it's not live. If it's like the main event, I will watch it the next day, just because I have to wait until like 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning to watch those fights. Whenever Cyborg fights, I will watch. Whenever Amanda Nunes fights, I will watch. The highest level, I will watch, because they are tremendous fighters. But people like Tisha Torres, Weili Zhang, they're just not my cup of tea. Like, to be honest with you, I will watch it because, of course, it's going to be on the main card of a huge night. But I'm not looking forward to this one. I don't really have an opinion to really give you on that one, other than what I just said. I guess Tisha Torres, she's a very tough, gritty fighter. On the Ultimate Fighter, I think that when she was there, it was the season with Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate. I was kind of favoring her to do something there, because she just seemed like she was a tough girl and stuff like that. But it never really panned out for her. She has, of course, done a lot better over the past few years, and she's always kind of had herself around the top. So I think that she will continue to do that, and she will probably get a W. And now we have a fight that I'm actually really, really interested in. It's Ruthless Robbie Lawler taking on Funky Ben Askren. Now, I'm interested in this, but I'm also extremely worried it's going to be a very, very boring fight. Now, my friend Marco and I, we pretty much agree 100% that if you have the option of having Demetrius Johnson or having Ben Askren, we will 100% take Demetrius Johnson every single time. Because, yes, he's a flyweight, so yes, he's a small guy. And yes, he's maybe not the best at marketing and stuff like that, but he's still a phenomenal fighter, arguably the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet except for Jon Jones, as of right now. I would say number 1 is Jon Jones, number 2 is DC, and number 3 is Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. I would say those are the 3 best guys. So, by trading away Demetrius Johnson to get Ben Askren, who, as Dana White said, is like watching paint dry. That's how fucking boring his fights generally are. I understand that the UFC is trying to shut down a division to maybe save money when it comes to that type of stuff, or they just kind of want to get rid of it because nobody cares and stuff like that. But realistically, man, getting rid of Demetrius Johnson, I don't know. For me, it was a very stupid thing to do. And it just kind of shows the way that the UFC is going, which is they don't really care about the fights, or at least they don't really care about having the best fighters necessarily, as long as they have the best fighters at talking. The thing is, Ben Askren isn't even good at talking. Like, he's not that entertaining, at least not in my opinion. I've seen people say he's hilarious and stuff like that. I don't think he's that entertaining. Like, his episode on Rogan was interesting, but it wasn't one that, like, man, I want to re-listen to that. He's not one of those guys. He's not a Conor McGregor when it comes to his roasting. He's not even like Chael Sonnen. He's not even close to those guys. So there's really just nothing in there that really appeals to me. And the only thing that really interests me about this fight is that, number one, I'm rooting for Robbie Lawler, because we all know how much of a savage Robbie Lawler is. He goes out there and he literally tries to beat the shit out of you, and that's just what he does. That's what he wants to do. He wants to beat people up as badly as he possibly can until he retires. That's just his thing. And you have to respect that. You have to enjoy the way that guy fights. But the question is he going to be able to stop the takedowns of Ben Askren? Because we know that Robbie Lawler has a very good sprawl. He's got good takedown defense. But is he able to stop Ben Askren, who is a truly elite wrestler? Well, if he is able to, then I think it's going to be a very, very bad night for Ben Askren. He's going to get knocked the fuck out. His head's going to be in the nosebleeds. But if he's not able to, then it's just going to be an extremely boring fight for 3 rounds in which Ben Askren's going to be wrestle-fucking him and not really doing much to him. Because I don't think you're going to finish Robbie Lawler on the ground like that. Like, without hurting him and then, like, kind of like Tyron Woodley did. If you're not dropping him and then finishing him with some ground and pound, I don't think that's going to happen. And Ben Askren just isn't that kind of guy. I don't think he has the capabilities on the feet to hurt Robbie Lawler, and I just don't think it's going to happen. Like, I think it's either going to be Robbie Lawler knocks him the fuck out, which is an ideal scenario, I think, because it's the most fun. It's what we all kind of want to see. Or Ben Askren's going to wrestle fuck him. So I'm interested in seeing what happens in this fight, but I am very, very cautiously optimistic. But at the same time, I do understand it's probably going to be a boring fight. So I'm happy, but I'm also not happy. I think that when it comes to a matchup for Ben Askren to be welcome into, it's kind of like a really tough one. I think the UFC kind of did on purpose, which is good, because if you notice, like Brock Lesnar when he came in, kind of threw him to the wolves with Frank Mir. They kind of do that with a lot of people except for CM Punk. CM Punk's the only one. Of course, Mickey Gall, he's a good prospect and all, but he's not like this amazing world beater. So most people, when they have at least a big name and they have a lot of publicity behind them, they give him somebody really tough. And of course, Robbie Lawler, he is that kind of guy. He embodies toughness. He embodies just what vintage MMA fighters are. They're savages who are out there to knock you the fuck out or submit you or break your arm, whatever it is. So it could be a fun fight. It could also be an extremely boring one. I am rooting for Robbie Lawler, and I think he will get the W, but at the same time, or at least my heart's with Robbie Lawler, but my brain says probably he's going to get taken down and wrestle fucked. Moving on to the co-main event. This is one that my brother thinks is trash, but I think it's actually going to be really, really interesting. We have Tyron Woodley versus Kamaru Usman, and Usman's fights, they're kind of like Ben Askren's in the sense that they're extremely boring for the most part, but Usman is undoubtedly an absolute monster. Now, Tyron Woodley is just a savage. Like, people complain about him a lot because he complains a lot himself. But at the same time, you can't deny what the man has done inside the octagon. He beat down Robbie Lawler. He knocked out Robbie Lawler for the title. He beat down Stephen Wonderboy Thompson twice. Of course, the second one was a very boring fight. The first one was kind of boring in my opinion, but it somehow won. What was it, Fight of the Year? Whatever. He has had some boring fights, but it's because he's a very smart guy. All right, you can tell he has a GSP-ness about him. GSP-ness. He has a GSP type thing about him because he's smart in the sense that if his opponent, like Wonderboy Thompson, he knows he's a long, very smart kickboxer, but he thrives on the counterattack. So Woodley did the smart thing, which was make Wonderboy go to him, and that opened Wonderboy up for the big right hand and for the big, huge punches that Woodley can throw. And of course, he knocked him down in both fights and got pretty close to finishing him. So Woodley's very smart. He did the same thing against Damian Maia in terms of being smart, but not, of course, not the same strategy because Damian Maia has no striking. His only thing that he can really hurt you with is his boxing. I mean, his boxing, right, is his jiu-jitsu. If Damian Maia is on your back, then you're fucked. If he gets to the ground, then you're pretty close to being fucked. So Tyron Woodley kept it on the feet, and he boxed him up a little bit, and he just made sure that he scored as many points as possible and won each round. He did a very, very smart thing in that situation. So we know that he has the fight IQ to kind of do whatever needs to be done in the cage and not worry about being beloved by the fans, not really be worrying about having the best fights, the most entertaining fights that anybody's going to be talking about forever. He just wants to get the W. That's what he's all about, is winning the fights. Now, Kamaru Usman does seem like he's gotten kind of under his skin. Okay, he's been talking a lot of shit, and it's the type of trash talk that isn't like Colby Covington, which Colby Covington's whole thing is like racism, but in a very cheesy way to where you can kind of understand that it's 100% fake. So it's more like he's just annoying. He's just constantly chirping in your ear, but he's not really saying anything of any value or any relevance or anything that's really going to actually make you want to beat the shit out of him. Like, you want to beat him up just because he's a fucking annoying little prick, but you don't actually want to just destroy him, okay? Besides, Tyron Woodley already roasted him bad enough by saying that Covington's sister slid into his DMs and shit like that. So I think that Woodley's probably already gotten the upper hand, especially because Colby has already been stripped of his interim title, which is pretty hilarious, and it's just kind of a dumb situation for Covington. So I think that Kamaru Usman has done a pretty good job of kind of getting under Tyron Woodley's skin, and it does remain to be seen whether or not that is going to play out in the fight. We've never really seen somebody fighting Tyron Woodley do that, at least not in recent memory, to where he's really, really gotten his head. And we'll see if it does have an effect. You know, there are people that are, come to fight night, able to put all that stuff aside and just simply focus on the task at hand. But there are other people that, once you talk shit about them, like Cowboy Cerrone is a perfect example. If you are cordial with Cowboy and you're nice to him and you're kind of friendly towards him in the build-up of the fight, you're in for a very, very, very tough matchup. He will beat the shit out of you. But if you talk shit to him like Nate Diaz did, you can break him. I'm not going to say easily, but you can break him relatively easily. Guys who talk trash to him tend to beat him. Jorge Masvidal did the same thing. Talked a lot of trash to him, beat him down. Conor McGregor, that would be the big thing between them if they do fight, which I actually will talk about that later on. If they do fight, that's going to be a huge thing in Conor's favor, and the Cowboy's been pretty open about that. You know, he knows that Conor's going to roast him. He's going to kind of get in his head, and that's going to be definitely in favor of Conor. But is Tyron Woodley that kind of guy? Is Tyron Woodley like Cowboy, who suffers the type of trash talk, or is he the type of guy who can just put that aside on fight night, fight his fight smart, and get the W? We're going to find out this weekend, because Kamaru Usman has a relatively similar, actually I'm not going to say relatively, they have a very similar, very, very similar style to Tyron Woodley. You know, Tyron Woodley, he's an elite level wrestler with a huge hand, smart boxing, and he's very fast, he's very explosive. Kamaru Usman is kind of a similar build. You know, they're both very explosive, very powerful, and they're both elite wrestlers. So I think it's kind of going to be between who's going to have the better game plan come tonight, who's going to force the other one to make a mistake first, and who's going to get tired faster. Because we know Woodley carries a lot of muscle, but so does Usman. So will one of them get tired? Which one will get tired faster? And just kind of who's going to implement their skills better. It's just going to be a battle of wits, I think, this one. So we'll see what happens, man. It's going to be a fun fight. I think it's going to be definitely an interesting one. One that's going to kind of push both men to, I think, reach the next level, to be honest. Like, Kamaru Usman has never, of course, had a title fight, but Tyron Woodley's had many title fights, but he's never really been at risk of losing his title a single time. And it'll be interesting to see if Usman can put him in that type of situation. If he can put himself, if Tyron Woodley does find himself in a scenario where he is on the verge of losing his title, or at least he's having a very hard time against his opponent, well, how does he react? Because we've seen Rory McDonald put a beating on him. We saw Nate Marquardt knock him out. What happens when a young guy like Kamaru Usman, very skilled, very dangerous, is going to, find himself against him? Like, what's going to happen there? We'll see. We will see. And of course, Usman isn't exactly young. He's 31 years old, but he is still one of the best up-and-coming fighters. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens for both men. I think that Tyron Woodley, with his championship experience and with the traits that I mentioned before, in other words, him being very, very smart at understanding when not to make mistakes or to explode, using his fight IQ to the very maximum effect, basically, to use a Diaz quote. I think that's going to be the thing that kind of plays into his advantage and is going to give him the win. So I definitely think that Tyron Woodley is going to be getting the W and defending his title. And I think he's going to have that title for a long time. So overall, UFC 235, whether it's the prelims, I'm not going to say the early prelims because I don't really care about anybody on the early prelims, but the prelims between Diego Sanchez and Mickey Gall, there's some star power there between Misha Serkinov being a knockout guy and being just a fun guy to watch. Jeremy Stevens versus Dabit's going to be a barn burner, like I said, fight of the night probably. Cody Garbrandt versus Pedro Munoz is going to be a good fight. Tisha Torres, it's going to be a 3-rounder. It's going to be, just a grinder out type of fight. But I don't know, maybe they'll surprise us. Robbie Lawler Ben Askren is going to be an interesting fight at the very least. Whether it be fun or not, I don't know, but it's going to be interesting. With the Usman, I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be an interesting fight as well. And I think that Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith is going to be a beatdown. But we'll see a lot about Anthony Smith, and we will see Jon Jones, the greatest fighter in the world, in action. So overall, UFC 235 is a very, very good card. It's one that I'm really interested in. I'm really looking forward to, and I'm hoping that at least some of my picks will come true. I used to do a whole show on punchdrunksports.com where I would do picks, and it would seem like absolute just easy locks would kind of fail whenever I'd pick them. So we'll see if that continues now that I'm back to doing my predictions. And maybe I'm bringing back luck to people, but we'll see. If Jon Jones loses Anthony Smith, then I declare myself the reason. I literally declare myself the reason. So we'll see what happens there. As I mentioned earlier, I want to talk a little bit about Conor McGregor versus Cowboy Cerrone, which is seeming more and more likely. And I'm going to go ahead and go on Cowboy's Instagram page because he put up an interesting post the other day. Let me pull it up real fast. And, of course, they've been teasing this for a while now. And Rogan, and I think Brendan Schaub the other day on the Fight Companion were talking about how, as far as they know, it's a done deal. So it's looking like it is. Cowboy posted a picture of course, a Budweiser bottle and a bottle of Proper 12. And he wrote, Budweiser versus Proper Whiskey, July 6th. So I'm assuming this is pretty much confirming that at the very least, the fight is almost close to being 100% signed. And more than likely, the UFC is just waiting for a press conference to kind of do that. Probably waiting for this pay-per-view to kind of subside. And then they'll probably do a big announcement thing. Maybe they'll have both guys in the at the press conference and have them kind of talk trash and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see. For me personally, I think this is probably the best fight they can make for both men. Like Cowboy Cerrone, listen, he's earned this. He's absolutely earned this. There is no better fighter in the world, in my opinion, than Cowboy Cerrone in terms of just showing up whenever you tell him to show up. Like, if there's a fight in 3 weeks, he'll take it. If there's a fight in 2 weeks, he'll take it. If there's a fight in 3 days, he'll take it. Hell, if there's a fight in 3 hours, he'll probably take it. So there is no bigger man, I guess you could say, in terms of that, than Cowboy Cerrone. He will show up, he will take the money, and he will just fight whoever is in front of him. He'll probably fight a heavyweight on 3 hours' notice, to be honest with you. That's just the type of guy that Cowboy is. And having a baby recently, I think that he absolutely deserves this. This is a chance to make a ton of money, to set himself up. I don't know about for life, but he's going to be in on the pay-per-view points. He's going to be in on, everything about that. It's going to be a huge fight. He will make easily, I think, a few million at the very least, especially because, he has that Budweiser sponsor, so that's a pretty big deal. And he's just a unique character. He's a unique personality. He's a very, very fun fighter to watch. So he has absolutely earned this opportunity to fight the biggest name in mixed martial arts history in Conor McGregor. And when it comes to McGregor, I think that, having lost to Khabib, it would be a big mistake to do him versus Khabib as the very first fight back for both men. Because, let's just be real, like, whenever people have a direct rematch after a fight, the guy that lost almost never gets the win. It just doesn't happen. Because there isn't enough time for him to really make the adjustments and learn the stuff that he needs to at the very least close the gap a little bit. So in my opinion, if they do that, it's going to be to the detriment of the UFC and of Conor McGregor. So giving him a guy like Cowboy Cerrone, who, like I said earlier, he kind of breaks mentally in some ways if you talk shit to him, or at least it gets under his skin. It makes him fight a stupid fight, kind of gets himself into bad situations, gets himself in the sticky spots. Then that's probably the best guy for Conor to fight, especially because Cowboy isn't necessarily the kind of guy that's going to go out there, take you down, try to just pound you out or submit you. He will take Conor down if he needs to, I think. Because I think that this new Cowboy, ever since his son was born, Danger, I think he's kind of seeing things from a new perspective. Before, he used to always say he didn't care about the belt. His whole thing was making as much money as possible, fighting as often as possible, and just kind of literally just about making money. He didn't care about the belt, he said. But now that his baby's been born, he understands that when you have that belt, it's not just you're the champion. The money's different. The sponsorships are different. The opportunities that open up for you are different. He's already kind of broken himself a little bit into the TV/movie world, so hats off to him for doing that. If I'm not mistaken, he's in a movie with Matt Damon coming up, so definitely an interesting one there. I think that this is the opportunity for him to really become the mainstream star that he probably could have been a long time ago if they'd have given him the right push, and if he'd just been able to kind of reach that next step a little. Just if he was just able to win that title. He has lost 2 title fights so far, both against those non-shows, but we'll see what happens, man. Like, this, regardless, whoever you're rooting for, and I personally am a fan of both men. I'm a huge fan of both guys. I think that honestly I would probably be rooting for Cowboy in that fight, just because everything that Cowboy has done throughout his career, everything that he's achieved, everything that he's put himself through, the amount of amazing fights he's had well over 50 fights now. Not just counting the UFC, but in general, he's had well over 50 fights, and he's an incredible fighter. He's an incredible fighter with just undieable spirit. So I think that I would be picking him as the person I want to see win. As of who I think would win, of course, we'll talk about this a little bit later on if they do announce the fight, and as it gets closer, I definitely think that Conor has the advantages. But at the same time, at least he has a mental advantage. But at the same time, if Cowboy takes it to the ground, that's going to be very, very bad for Conor, because Cowboy's jiu-jitsu is insane, and his ground and pound is very, very slick, and people don't give him enough credit for how good his wrestling is. So Cowboy, make no mistake about it, he could do a lot of damage to Conor. And let's not get it twisted. On the feet, Cowboy Cerrone is an absolute monster. His Muay Thai is absolutely sick, and he can really he could beat Conor on the feet, especially because we've seen Conor looking kind of sloppy in some footage, and he's looking kind of slow. He's not looking like the same, slip and slide, just beat the shit out of you on the counterattack Conor that we've always seen. He seems to be going towards a more traditional boxing approach, and it's not who he is, and it's just not it's not really in his wheelhouse. He needs to be the fighter that he's always been, not try to be a more traditional boxing type of fighter. So, and that's now the footage we've seen was from sparring, so who knows? That might have been him just trying something different, maybe trying to see new looks, maybe improve on his boxing if he wants to do a boxing fight or something like that. But I think he needs to focus on what made him great, which was great movement, incredible footwork, get in, get out, knock him out, move on. That's what his game was. Slide to the left, hit him with the left hand, finish him with whatever. And that was what Conor does, man. So if he can do that, if he can kind of get under Cowboy's skin, if he can get him pissed off, if he can make him make mistakes, and he can get back to his counter-striking style and really exploit the fact that Cowboy doesn't have a lot of good movement. He doesn't really move his head much. He is very vertical. He just kind of stands there. He stands in front of you, and he throws bombs. If Conor can exploit that, have superior movement, get in his head, and break him down, then I think that Conor does win that fight. But regardless, it would be just a phenomenal fight. And I would absolutely adore not just the actual fight itself, but the build-up to it. I think it'd be insane. And it is the match to do. It is the fight to do. It might not be the fight that we deserve, but it's the fight we need. So hopefully the UFC will satisfy that need and give us the fight that we all want to see. Moving on to the Premier League, and I don't know how many of you guys are interested in this type of stuff, but football/soccer, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you are in the world, that is the sport that I've loved ever since I was a little kid. So I'm going to talk about it. And if you want to skip this, that's fine. It is what it is. I talk about what I like, and that's just the way it is. Talk about the Premier League right now. Manchester United are on a run. They are on a run. They have beaten their longest ever away game streak of all time. Same thing. But regardless, eight away wins in a row. That is the longest in the club's history. And that just goes to show, man, that ever since Ole has come in, of course, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, ever since he came in, he has not just changed the mood around the club, but the mentality of the club. A lot of times whenever we go away from home, Jose would be even more conservative than he would be against anybody at Old Trafford, which it kind of makes sense, right? You would think that kind of makes sense because you're going away from home. They're going to maybe have a bit more courage against you. So you want to cover yourself a little bit better. But when you are already as defensive as you are at Old Trafford, how the hell are you going to go to an away ground, and be even more defensive and allow them to put pressure on you? What you should do when you're that much superior to most teams you play against is attack, attack, attack. Of course, have good defense as well. Cover yourself as much as possible, but attack, attack, attack. Because if you score on them, they're going to realize very quickly that they're in for a very tough match, and they might move forward a bit more, but that just leaves you more space in behind their defense. So you need to attack, especially when you look at the difference in ability between our attacking players and our defenders. Who's better, Romelu Lukaku or Chris Smalling? At least, of course, not necessarily who's a better striker, stuff like that. Who is better in their respective role? Romelu Lukaku, Chris Smalling. Who's better, Luke Shaw or Anthony Martial? Now, Luke Shaw has had a great season so far. I'm a big fan of him. There's nothing against him. He's definitely by far the only one in that defense that I think I have any kind of confidence in. You look at the right back position, Ashley Young, Antonio Valencia, not Dalot necessarily because he is still very young and he hasn't had a lot of chances, but let's just say between Young and Valencia, and I guess you could say Darmian as well. Who's better in their respective positions? Marcus Rashford or one of those three players? So clearly, we have, and I'm not even going to get started on Phil Jones. I'm just going to leave it at that. We clearly have a much better offensive unit than we do with our defensive group. So how the hell are you going to base your entire team on defending when your defenders are trash and your strikers are phenomenal? And that's the difference. That is the difference right there, is that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he has, of course, changed the mentality. He has, of course, brought the joy back to the club, both fans and, of course, the players. But he's also given them the style that Manchester United has always had throughout their entire history, which is just attack, attack, attack. You score 2, we'll score 3. We'll score 4. We'll score 5. As the chant goes, we often score 6, but we seldom score 10 because we go out there and we score goals. That's just the way it is. That's what you have to do. Jose Mourinho, Louis van Gaal, Davy Moyes, none of those guys fit those styles. Okay? For the fans to really get excited, we need to be not just in contention for winning titles and trophies and stuff like that. We need to be playing good football because that's what we've come to expect. You look at Real Madrid. Okay? When they had Jose Mourinho, they did win a La Liga. They did win a couple of Del Rey or something like that. But their football was trash. What happened? He got his ass sacked. Same thing happened with us. At Chelsea, in the second one, of course. And the first one was still a different type of football. Even though he was a very defensive manager in his first stint at Chelsea, he was still very good at scoring a lot of goals. That Chelsea's team did score a lot of goals. So credit to them for that. But his second stint at Chelsea, of course, the first season I think they finished third or something like that. Basically, their win at I think it was Anfield with Gerrard slipping gave City basically the title. The year after that, of course, Chelsea dominated and won the title. The year after that, they were I think they were 17th or 18th or maybe even 16th at the best when he got sacked. So we've seen that it's not just about the tactics. It's just everything about the way he manages is toxic, and eventually everything collapses for him. I'm going to drink a little bit of water. Hold on. Everything around him just kind of collapses. So eventually, whether he's at Chelsea, whether he's at Real Madrid, whether he's at United, whether he's at, I guess not really Inter, he's only there for 2 years, same thing with Porto. But eventually everything around him does collapse. And that's what happened, basically, is he came to a club that was already in massive difficulty, and he implemented a more boring style than Van Gaal's. And of course he did achieve more than Van Gaal because he is a better manager. But eventually, the fans, the players, everybody got sick of it. Everybody got sick of his toxic, boring attitude. Ollie comes in. He embodies Sir Alex Ferguson's values. You can just tell. You can tell that everything he does, whether it's him or Mickey Phelan, everything that they do is emulating and based on the Sir Alex Ferguson era. It's just clear as day. The way he is on the bench, the way he is with the players, with the fans, everything is just kind of very Sir Alex Ferguson-esque. It just fits perfectly for the fabric of the club, and he's 100% the perfect manager for us to move forward. The question is, of course, from now to the end of the season, is going to be able to continue to get these results, and probably not. Probably not. He's eventually going to have a few matches where he's going to drop some points. We do have Arsenal in March. Of course, we have PSG on Tuesday. I think it is Tuesday or Wednesday. At the Parc des Princes. So we'll see what happens there. We're probably going to get knocked out, but at the very least, I think we're going to go out there and try to do our very best to get the W. So we'll see, man. But as of right now, I think that 100% Ole Gunnar has absolutely proven himself to be the ideal manager for United moving forward. Him and McPhelan, they need to stay. They just need to stay because they've brought back a feeling to the club that we haven't felt ever since Alex Ferguson retired. So if he can stay on, he can continue to improve the team, buy in players during the summer that will improve our defense. Maybe bring an extra midfielder, maybe somebody to replace Alexis Sanchez, because let's just be real, Sanchez isn't on that level anymore. At least not with us. He just doesn't seem to have that confidence. He doesn't seem like the same player we saw at Arsenal or Barcelona, really. Even though at Arsenal, I think that's kind of where we saw the best of Alexis Sanchez. He doesn't seem like the same player. Doesn't seem like he has the same heart, the same drive. Just doesn't seem like he's that guy anymore. So I think that we need to get rid of him. And we need to find a way to replace him. But also distribute the minutes between Lukaku, Rashford, Martial, and whoever comes in. And of course, Jesse Lingard. But as of right now, United are playing phenomenal football. Even when we don't play phenomenal football, we still get the W for the most part. We like against Chelsea, for example. It was a very smart match, a very, very smart performance by the team. And it just kind of shows that the good thing about Ollie is that he doesn't have to play full-blown offense. He doesn't have to play full-blown defense. He can mix it in throughout the match. Of course, a lot of that probably is Mick Phelan, because I have nothing but respect for Mickey Phelan. A phenomenal coach, was there for like the last 5 years under Sir Alex, so he understands what it means to win stuff. He knows what it means to be champions of Europe. He knows, he was there, if I'm not mistaken, during the Moscow final. So he knows what it's like to be at the pinnacle of the sport. And alongside a guy like Ollie, who has the charisma, has the personality, everybody loves him. You cannot watch an interview with him and not smile. So everything about the club under Ollie Solskjaer and Mickey Phelan is just perfect. So I think that moving forward, these two guys need to stay. They need to stay because they are united. They literally represent what the fans love about the club. So in my opinion, moving forward, those two guys need to stay. And let me just go ahead and bring up the standings real fast, because I did have that active. Actually, for some reason I closed the page, but I do have it right here anyway. Let me go ahead and bring up the standings. Of course, we all know that Liverpool are top of the league on even matches played with everybody except for Chelsea. But Chelsea's completely irrelevant, basically, just like we are, just like Arsenal are. There's really only two teams here that are competing for the title right now, and that's Liverpool and City. With 28 matches played, Liverpool have 69 points. City have 68, and then Tottenham in third have 60. We are sitting fifth with 55 points. Arsenal at fourth have 56, and Chelsea have 53, but they also have a game in hand. So theoretically, Chelsea, if they win their game in hand, they could be in fifth and would be in sixth. But the thing that people seem to forget is that before Mourinho left, he said that for him to achieve fourth place, it would take almost a miracle, and it would be pretty much impossible. In 2 months, we were in fourth. Of course, Arsenal have passed us again because we had that match against Liverpool, in which we drew, and that's fine. A draw against Liverpool, league leaders, very, very dangerous team, dynamic team, bitter rivals. It's fine to get a draw, so that's okay. But moving forward, I think we will continue to win matches at home, at least not lose them away, and I believe that we will easily get fourth. I think that Arsenal, once we beat them in March, they're going to understand that they are completely done when it comes to the top four. The big question is, are we going to be able to catch Tottenham? Of course, they're only 5 points ahead of us, and Tottenham, they're very hit and miss. That's the unfortunate thing for them, for the Spurs, is that they can go the first half of the season and look like they're going to be true contenders, but then you realize that they have no depth in their team. They literally have no depth. Their second striker is Fernando Llorente, who was a good player 5 years ago. He was a good, dangerous player 5 years ago. Now he's not. He can come in, he can do some damage, he can contribute because he's a big guy with great heading, but other than that, he's not really good for much. Lucas Moura, he's a good player. He's had a great series of performances in August, won Player of the Month. But other than that, what has he really done? Not much. He's very fast, yeah, but he's nothing special. Dele Alli's having an off season, so he's not necessarily looking like the player that everybody thought he was. But he could, of course, still improve. Who knows? So realistically, apart from Harry Kane and Christian Eriksen, who in that team, and I guess you could say Son, who's I love Son. Apart from those three players, who can you really say is a world-class player? I guess you could say Lloris too, the goalkeeper. And of course, you could say Vertonghen is definitely world-class on his day. Alderweireld, he's hit and miss a little bit too. Davinson Sanchez has a lot of talent, but as of right now, that's a very, very, very good starting 11. That's arguably the best starting 11 in the league from some perspectives. But you look at their bench. Those are great players, but when you replace them, who are you putting in? You're putting in Winks. You're putting in Lucas Moura. You're putting in Lamela. You're putting in Llorente. You aren't putting in these amazing players. So it's just normal for them come January, February, once players have a lot more fatigue, once the Champions League is almost on its way, or as of, like, for example, right now, where they have Premier League, They have the Champions League in which they're both in. They're in both, and they're looking very good against Dortmund. They won 3-0, so you would expect them to move on. So you know they're going to have a lot of matches with very, very little room between them, and they have zero depth in their team. Literally, as soon as one of their starters gets injured, they have a not that great player coming in to replace them. So it's normal for them to struggle like that, and I just don't expect them to really be able to maintain that third place position this season with us on their ass and really coming at them. And Arsenal aren't a bad team. Arsenal aren't that bad. So you never know. They could be able to climb back up and finish fourth. It is between us, Arsenal, Tottenham really for fourth. I'm going to go ahead and say that Chelsea are kind of out of the race because, yes, they had a great match against City the other day in the Carabao Cup final. They had a great performance. Let's not get it twisted, man. Their defense was solid. They could have scored a goal or two, so they had their chances. They could have won that. But between Sarri coming out and roasting the players publicly a couple times, and then the whole Kepa thing. If you haven't seen it, go look at it. I'll probably have the link in the description down below, but if you haven't seen it, definitely go watch it. Kepa, basically, he what seems to me acted like he was injured because a goalkeeper getting cramps is just pretty ridiculous. I don't care if it's 120 minutes. I don't care what it is. It's almost impossible for a keeper to get cramps. Like he doesn't really run that much, and yes, he is pretty active in the build-up play because they play a lot of back passes because he does have really good passing and stuff like that. But realistically, you're not going to get a cramp or two cramps too with the amount of running that a keeper does. I mean, maybe you can pull something when you're diving or something like that, but realistically, a cramp, fuck off. So it of course makes sense for Sarri to see that and think this guy needs to come off because we're at the end of a match of a final, by the way, against Man City, who are arguably the best team in Europe, and we can't afford to have an injured keeper. We just can't afford that. And we have one sub. Why not take him out and put in Willy Caballero, who, by the way, is a keeper who has a history of winning shootouts for his team. He has a history of saving quite a bit of penalties. He's not a great keeper by any chance, by any stretch of the imagination, but when it comes to penalties, he is a specialist. So it makes complete sense to take out an injured goalkeeper, or at least a seemingly injured goalkeeper, who is very young, doesn't have the kind of experience at this kind of a level, in this kind of a match, in a final like this, against a team of the level of Man City. It makes sense to want to do that sub. And then for Kepa to completely undermine what Sarri wanted, refusing to leave the pitch, refusing to even go talk to him on the side, it was just a complete lack of respect. So in my opinion, whether Sarri leaves now, Sarri quits at the end of the season, or Sarri gets sacked at the end of the season, it is over. It is 100% over. Whatever control he had over the locker room, whatever kind of power he had, it is completely gone. Nobody in that locker room respects him anymore, in my opinion. I think it's just 100% over. And I said this at the beginning of the season, I said this to my friend Fabio, to his dad, to Bakazi, my friend Gabriele. I told them, to all of these people, even though some other friends as well. So there are witnesses. I said that Sarri probably will not make it to the end of the season, not because he's not necessarily a good manager, not necessarily because he doesn't have a good style and all that stuff, but simply because mentally he doesn't have what it takes to manage a team like Chelsea, and he doesn't have the history it takes to manage a team like Chelsea. And listen, Chelsea's history isn't that rich, apart from like 2004 on. But you look at what they've won in recent years, and I actually looked this up. Since like 2010, they have won 3 Premier Leagues, they've won the Champions League, they've won the Europa League, they've won like 3 FA Cups, they've won, of course, a couple Carabao Cups, if I'm not mistaken, and they've won some Community Shields. So they have won a lot of cups there. Conte has won the World Cup. All right, Conte has won the World Cup. Hazard is one of the best players in the world. So you look at that roster. You look at what this team has achieved, what a lot of these players have achieved. There are European champions there. There are world champions there. What has Sarri ever won? He has won what the Italians call the Campionato d'Inverno, which is the championship that starts in August and ends on the 31st of December. That is literally all he's ever won. So he has won nothing. Don't count Serie B. Don't count any of that garbage. When it comes to truly prestigious trophies, what has he ever won? Nothing. So how do you expect a manager like that to come into a club like Chelsea, who have the likes of have the likes of Eden Hazard? How are you going to expect these kind of guys to come in and respect him? Have David Luiz, who is a very, very big personality, who won the Champions League. How do you expect that guy to respect him? They might respect him, but at the same time, as soon as something slightly goes the way that they don't want it to go, they're going to abandon him in an instant. Just like that. Literally just like that. It happened to Antonio Conte. It happened to Jose Mourinho. It has happened to countless managers who have gone to manage Chelsea. It happens time after time after time. And those are all managers that have actually won something. Managers that have won titles, domestic titles, European titles. They have won a ton of stuff. And they all get sacked. Whether it's Abramovich being a stuck-up prick, whether it's that piece of shit constantly sacking people, or whether it's the fans immediately booing you if you don't start achieving what they expect you to achieve, turning on you like they did to Jose Mourinho, who is literally the best manager they've ever had, turning on him in an instant, or whether it's Sarri, whether it's Conte. It does not matter. Between the fans, the locker room itself being shit, and the owner, at Chelsea you are 100% guaranteed to fail at one point or another. Whether it's the first season, the second season, you will fail. It's just guaranteed. So in my opinion, there was absolutely no doubt that Sarri was going to get sacked eventually. Probably come the end of the season, to be honest with you. Like, at this point, I don't know if he's going to make it. There were rumors that he was going to get sacked if he lost the final, which that doesn't seem to have happened. But I wouldn't have been surprised. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose the next match and if he gets sacked then. Because realistically, man, like, if you look at their last few results, let's see if I can bring that up. Chelsea's last few results. Let's see. I'll just go over to when the real issues started happening. All right. So in the Carabao Cup, they beat Tottenham. They beat them 4-2 on penalties. So that was like the last huge win. Before that, they lost to Arsenal 2-0. Let's just go ahead and start from there. Lost 2-0 to Arsenal in the Premier League. They beat Tottenham on penalties 4-2. They beat Sheffield Wednesday 3-0 in, of course, the FA Cup. They lost to Bournemouth 4-0. They beat Huddersfield 5-0. But that was like, okay, the rebound is here. All right, the struggles are gone. Higuain's here. He's going to really lead the team. He's going to start banging in the goals, and it's going to be great for everybody. And then, of course, they lose 6-0 to Man City. Then they go in the Europa League, and they have a hard time against Malmo, only beating them 2-1. And then they lose to us 2-0 in the FA Cup. Then, of course, they beat Malmo 3-0, which is fine. And then that's pretty much where we're at now. So, except for the fact that they did lose to... that's right, because the Brighton match was postponed. And then, of course, they lost to City 4-3 on penalties. And then they finally went on and beat Tottenham 2-0. So they're a very, very hit-and-miss team right now. As you can tell, they can win a tough match against Tottenham, but then they can also lose a very easy match on paper to a team like Bournemouth. So there's no real consistency to the team right now, and there's really no belief, I guess you could say, that Sarri is going to be there for any much longer. So half the time, these players who already probably don't necessarily respect him in a big way, they start to ask themselves, why am I even going to give my best to a guy who's not going to be here in a month? So he's kind of getting into that type of scenario, and it's just not a good place to be for any manager, let alone somebody who historically hasn't really won anything and hasn't really had to deal with a lot of egos. Like, if you look at the players he had at Napoli, which is by far, apart from Chelsea, the biggest job he's ever had in his career. If you look at who he had, the biggest player he had was Higuain. And Higuain, he was happy because the entire team just played perfectly around him. Literally, the system around that team was get the ball to Higuain and let him score. That's what it was. Other than that, who do you have? I guess you could say maybe Hamsik was historically the best player they've had. Not counting Maradona, of course. I'm talking about like recent memory. Hamsik, he's just not that great a player. He's a good player, really good player, but he's not that big of an ego. Let's just be real. They haven't really had anybody huge. They just haven't. Higuain was the biggest one. He's not really an ego kind of guy. It doesn't seem like it, at least. So he's never had to deal with that type of stuff. You have Hazard. You have David Luiz. You have guys. David Luiz, I don't think he's that great of a player, but he's he was a driving force for that Champions League final win. You know, these are all players that have done a lot in their careers. And then this guy comes in, and he's changing a lot of stuff. He talks shit about you in the public, and they're just like, who the fuck are you? So it makes sense for them to turn on him. And it makes sense for Chelsea to turn on him because that's who they are. That's who they are as a club. They're not loyal. The fans aren't loyal. The owner definitely isn't loyal. Nothing about that club is loyal. The only thing that matters there is short-term fixes to possibly win a trophy. That is literally it. They don't look at the long term. They look at the short term. The only thing that remains there is, of course, the owner and the players that don't really ever leave. They don't really ever change. They've pretty much been the same team forever now, and that's just the way it is. So as soon as you sign for Chelsea, you need to know that you're at great risk of getting sacked very, very quickly. So I guess my whole thing for the Premier League is that, in my opinion, you know, Chelsea are not going to be finishing the top four. I just think that they don't have the consistency. They don't have the belief in the manager. The players are shit in terms of the way they act, the way that they are towards their manager. The fans are fickle. And I just don't think that really Chelsea are going to be able to achieve top four. Now, they might still be able to do it. If they do get a new manager, then I think that will change things quite a bit. Kind of like what happened to us at United. But we'll see. Well, we'll see. But regardless, as of right now, I think that City are going to win the title. Liverpool are going to finish second. United will finish third. And I have Tottenham finishing fourth. I think that Arsenal and Chelsea are going to be the two teams that miss out once again. And I guess that's just kind of the best case scenario right now because I don't want Liverpool to win the title. I don't want either one to win the Champions League. But as long as Liverpool don't win the title, I guess at this point I can't really complain too much because their streak will continue. But yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and talk real fast about Crackdown because I do mention that, you know, video games are also a huge thing that I like to talk about on the channel. As I said, I have a Mortal Kombat channel. Definitely go check that out. That's my number one favorite franchise. But I have been playing Crackdown for the past few days. Of course, I have Game Pass, which I was doing the calculation. It's about €9 a month. So you're looking at €120 more or less for an entire year. Let's just say 120. More like 110, I guess, if you think about it, you know. No, not really. No, not really. That's not really what it is. It's just, let's just say 120 and make it easy. Between Forza Horizon, which I would have bought for sure, Forza Horizon 4, that's $70. I would have bought Crackdown for sure. That's 140. I would have bought Gears of War, which is coming out later this year. That's already, what, 210? And you figure there's probably going to be another exclusive. I think there's... What else? Well, no, the other Gears of War game is going to be for PC, which I probably can't play. So let's just say guaranteed $240 I would have spent. So I easily just saved basically, you know, a third of what I would have spent on the games. No, excuse me. What am I even talking about? $120 for Game Pass. I would have bought 3 games, which would have been a total of about, what, 70, 40, yeah, 210. So you figure I've just saved a pretty solid amount of money by just getting Game Pass. So if you do have an Xbox and you do like Xbox exclusives and you're interested in what they have, maybe you don't have a lot of games, then definitely get Game Pass. In my opinion, that's the best thing to do because they have so many different types of games. You know, they have Resident Evil, they have Devil May Cry, they even have Pro Evolution Soccer, which is a shit game, but it's still there. They have a bunch of Assassin's Creeds. They have, of course, Halo. They have Gears of War, all the Xbox exclusives. They have so many phenomenal games. I definitely recommend you do it. If you are somebody like me who wants to buy the exclusives and knows for a fact they're going to buy them, and you're going to save yourself a bunch of money. So basically I saved, let's just say I saved about $140 on games that I was 100% sure that I was going to buy. 100%. I absolutely saved at least $240. So definitely do Game Pass if you are a big buyer in games, especially if you're a fan of Xbox exclusives. But as I was saying, you know, I was playing Crackdown 3, of course, and I didn't have a lot of high expectations for the game coming in because I played Crackdown 1, I think, for the first time when this was probably 2010, 2011. So both Crackdown 1 and 2 had already come out and been out for a while. So I got it with Games of Gold, and I was like, all right, fine, this might be fun. Maybe it was later than that, actually. Games of Gold, I think, was like 2011 or 12 when it first came out. I'm not sure about that, but regardless, I played it well after the game had actually come out, and as well as Crackdown 2. And I wasn't that big of a fan. I thought the mechanics were kind of garbage. The gameplay just kind of felt, I don't know, it just felt off to me. So I wasn't having a lot of expectations towards Crackdown 3, especially because it kept on being postponed and a lot of issues with the game. But I downloaded it because it was free, at least, $10 a month, whatever, for the entire library. It's basically Netflix, but for gaming. So I was figuring, fuck it, let's just give it a shot. I downloaded it, and of course, I knew Terry Crews was in it, so that's what kind of pushed me to be more interested in the game. Who doesn't want to play as Terry Crews? And I gotta say, man, I'm actually enjoying the shit out of the game. It's very basic, alright? It's not one of those games that, look at me like, oh, the story's phenomenal, or this is groundbreaking in this way or that way. It's definitely not, but it's a fun game to play. Right now, my 3 main games are FIFA, unfortunately, because FIFA's trash, but I love the sport so much that I'm gonna play a football game regardless. I gave PES a shot like last week, and it was just absolute trash, just garbage. I couldn't play it anymore. It's just garbage in every single way. So FIFA is pretty much my only option in terms of that. And of course, Red Dead Redemption, I'm still playing the story. I'm loving it. I take my time with this type of game because I want to do every single thing. And I like to play a bunch of different games at the same time. That's just kind of how I am. I dedicate my entire weekend to FIFA because I do the weekend league. And the rest of the week I kind of play Red Dead, or I play Crackdown, or I play some other stuff here and there. I play a lot online with buddies. In other words, my brother, excuse me. So it makes sense that I'm kind of this slow in Red Dead, and I'm absolutely loving Red Dead Redemption. Let's not get me wrong. And towards the end of the game, it's a phenomenal game. And I figured, I only had like 30 minutes to play. Let's try Crackdown, and it is literally the perfect game if you want to play for 30 minutes to an hour. Which in an hour you're not really going to be able to do much on Red Dead Redemption. You need a solid hour and a half, 2 hours to really do anything, to really get your teeth grinding for the day and stuff like that. Whereas in Crackdown, in 30 minutes, you can do a few things. You can do a few missions and stuff like that, and you can get quite a bit of stuff done. And it does have that one more mission type of thing going for it. So it's very, very solid. I will say that, like I mentioned, if you're looking for a great story, if you're looking for something innovative, you're not going to find it here. But if you're looking for pure fun, much like Saints Row kind of type of thing, then Crackdown 3 I think is a very, very good game. I did look to see what reviewers are giving it, and it's all pretty much, average, like 5 to 6. So nothing special. I think I did see like 1.7, but there's really not that great ratings about it. And I can understand that. I can understand that 100% because it's not an amazing game, but it's a very fun game. So it's one of those games that if it's like my case, where you have Game Pass, then yeah, download it. If you're going to buy it for full price, I definitely say don't do that. I say wait a little bit, wait until it's $30, and then it's well worth your money. But Crackdown 3 is definitely a very fun game. I love the mechanics. I love the fact that as you get orbs and as you improve, there's so much to improve as well in terms of your character's abilities and stuff like that. And it's just very easy to do. It all just flows very well. You get faster, you get stronger. It just feels good. It feels like you're going from an elite soldier to a superhuman. It's just very, very fun. And I definitely recommend it. I definitely recommend it to any Game Pass owners to pick it up and download it and just play it. It's well worth it. So it's a very, very fun game. And I think that's pretty much it for this podcast, to be honest with you. I mean, I wanted to talk about the Champions League a little bit, but I think I'll talk about that in a couple of days. I do think I'll be doing like one or at least 2 of these a week. So you figure today's Friday. So what I might do is do one, let's just say Friday, anytime between Thursday and Friday. So it'll probably drop on Friday night for people in the US and Saturday morning for people in Europe, and one on between Monday and Tuesday. That way I can kind of cover the UFC fights that just happened on Monday or Tuesday and kind of do a preview for the Champions League and stuff like that. And then of course towards the weekend I can do like predictions for upcoming fights, and I can do all that type of stuff. So more or less I think that's kind of the schedule I'm going to be looking at right now. But I could also do a lot more. It just kind of depends on how this kind of goes. And yeah, whatever happens in sports, if something interesting happens, I'll probably cover it. It's just the way it is. And I'm really happy to be doing this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm sure it was a little bit rough because I'm used to doing this podcast with a co-host. So we bounce our ideas back and forth, and it's not just me talking to myself. I'm used to doing like that kind of podcast with 2 people, or a YouTube video that's about 10 minutes long, and I kind of limit myself to being very, very concise, summarizing a lot of things, getting my opinion across as fast as possible. But I just wanted to do something like this. It's a bit of a longer format, but it's what I enjoy doing. Whether my opinions are interesting or not, I don't know. You just let me know in the comments. Definitely hit me up on Instagram. I'll have all the stuff in the descriptions and all that stuff, whether it's on YouTube, hopefully on like Podcast Republic, or on iTunes, all that stuff, on the podcast app. Hopefully I will be able to get this stuff on all those ASAP. And if you enjoyed it, guys, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support to anybody who does listen to it. And hopefully this will be a nice podcast going forward, and having some guests and stuff like that here and there. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to interview some fighters, some players, and something like that, and kind of get ourselves out there in a more interesting way, and bring you guys content that isn't just me talking to you guys, or talking to myself, or just have some interesting stuff for you. So I'm going to go ahead and copy Punch Drunk real fast, and I'm going to say, without you, I'm just talking to myself. And I will only say that one time, but it is true. You know, if nobody listens to this, then it was just me ranting and annoying anybody around me, including my cat, including my girlfriend, who are probably pissed off at me for talking like a dumbass for about an hour. So I will end it. So thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.